Well, hi, welcome everybody to another evening of Master Talks. And this evening, we're going to be speaking with some of our Vail national team members and getting an overview and the lowdown and the insights about our new national standards. It's called Everything New AASI PSIA. So I'd like to welcome on this evening our distinguished guests to the panel. This is going to be Mr. Chris Rogers, Mr. Mike Hafer, and the lovely Lindsay Stevens. Woohoo! Welcome, gang.
Hey, hey.
Thanks for having us, Jen.
I'm so excited. Is Lindsay joining us as well? Well, we'll welcome her when she does come. Hey, can you guys hear me okay? Are we all good? Yeah, good.
Yep.
Okay. So thank you for coming on this evening and sharing your experiences with both the development and the training of the new national standards across the country. I thought, with all of our involvement with our candidates at all the different levels, I think bringing everybody up to speed with a little bit of history and an overview about how we got from the learning connection model into our national standards, how it merged with a pretty amazing academic structure would be something that would help everybody. So I'm going to let you guys jump right in and maybe introduce yourselves, share a little bit about yourselves, and then let's go ahead and let you run with whatever you would like to present. And then when we get to the point where we have some questions, we'll see what our listeners would like to ask.
Jen, I can go first. It looks like Chris is on mute. So Mike Hafer, out of the Vail Village now. I spent the last 8 years over at Breckenridge, and prior to that, I was out in Lake Tahoe, California. This is my third term as a national team member on the Alpine side. I was on the 08 team, 12 team, and now the 2021 team. And really looking forward to next year and what we will be delivering at Levy. And I say that because I think that has a ton of influence, or Interski has had a ton of influence on where we are today. So Chris, do you want to take it from there?
I was trying to get on my computer too. Hey, Chris Rogers. I am on the, this is my second term on the AASI snowboard team, and been involved in both the snowboard task force and the teaching task force. And let's see, 10 years here at Vail, and just excited to get into it a little bit with why we went this route with the teaching people skills and technical skills corners of the LCM.
Sorry, I muted myself. Ah, wonderful. So would you guys like to start with just a general overview? Actually, let me ask you. I'll go ahead and get you rolling here. Give us a little bit of a history as to where the inspiration and ideas came from, not just necessarily the learning connection model, but how that started to filter into and create some structure for what now has become our new certification standards.
So
This term on the team in Ushuaia. You want to jump in there?
sorry, Chris, I missed part of that.
I was just the kind of the intro to the LCM and kind of where that came from, and that goes back to the Ushuaia Interski where you were on your last term, yeah.
So yeah, a couple of things real quick on that. So I was in St. Anton in 2011. Excuse me. I was not able to attend the Ushuaia Interski. However, I was part of the if you will, the workforce to go into Ushuaia. But to start with, I think, Chris, that and it goes honestly way beyond and prior to my terms on the team. So starting with the experiences, and one of the reasons why I brought up Interski to kick this off, because when my experiences in the 2011 St. Anton Interski, we brought a message to the table that it was all about flexibility around our students. So very student-centered teaching, as most of us are aware. And we have people showing up on equipment that is front side carving, backside type of all mountain equipment, and anything and everything in between. So with that said, working in the US as a ski instructor, we have so many people with so many different variables in their goals, their wants, and their needs that come to our lessons. So our message was based around, at that time, was based around very much a student-centered progression, or if you will, or lesson format. Now, with that said, that technical message became very, very, I guess, if you will, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not as focused as we could have been. We were called out by some other teams, other nations, on our technical message. I think everyone there really understands that the U.S. brings a very strong focus on the guest, but the message around our technical side became very convoluted, where we struggled to deliver performance on the hill, and maybe where we struggled to deliver performance when we were giving our clinics. So with that, we challenged ourselves on the teams and delivering a tighter message around, one, the technical skills, and then two, what is it that we do in our teaching that brings out and really sets us apart from other nations when it came to the people skills. And that's where people skills really started to come into play and develop. From there, we dug in and we really started looking at what those attributes were that put us ahead of other nations.
Cool. And I think at least the message that we heard coming out of St. Anton and going towards Ushuaia, as general membership, was that question of what makes great teaching, what makes great instruction. I think that was the kind of the message that the team went to Ushuaia with, was defining great instruction, what makes a great ski instructor. And starting from that technical side, probably because of that challenge, as you put it, from St. Anton, the Alpine team went to Ushuaia with a very strong sense of the 5 Alpine fundamentals. And that was kind of the big message that the PSIA team brought to Argentina. The snowboard team at that point was working through kind of some of the building blocks of what became the people skills fundamental, and had kind of brought that piece of it. And we hadn't really touched the teaching side of things. And I think that presentation in Ushuaia was taken very well and encouraged the team. And so when I made the team in 2016, that fall we started talking about, okay, we need to fill in the rest of those corners. We had the learning connection model, we had the graphic and the framework with the technical skills corner, the teaching skills corner, and the people skills corner, and the blue ring around it that's instructor decisions and behavior. And so the 2016 to 2020 term was really defined by developing those teaching skills fundamentals and people skills fundamentals. And that's where the cross-discipline groups and cross-division groups came together to build those fundamentals. So that was task forces made up of leaders from all disciplines: adaptive, cross-country, tele, snowboard, alpine, children's, kind of all of the different areas that we have professionals across the country kind of hashing out, well, what is great teaching and what makes great people skills. And those task forces really drove the message that we brought to Bulgaria in 2019, with a little bit more information about that kind of, now we've got this picture of what makes a great instructor. We kind of had that idea before, but here's what now fits in the teaching fundamentals and the people skills fundamentals. And here's why those are different. Here's why it's necessary
split those out. So that was our big message in 2019. And then looking forward to Levy Finland, starting to showcase how that's influenced our certification process, how that led to national standards, the new national standards that incorporate that framework. And there's still a lot of work to be done, but that's kind of the what is that now, 20-year picture on getting from back at Anton to now.
Chris, you brought up a couple of really good points there that I'd like to segue onto. Is that, first of all, when you were talking about the people skills, what I really appreciate, because that's the team that I stepped away from for 4 years, actually 5 years, due to unforeseen circumstances. And what I loved that came out of that, team was that not only did we develop the people skills, but we put them into a tangible or trainable type of messaging. We very specifically laid out, or you and the rest of the teams very specifically laid out stepping stones or objectives that someone can actually see, read about, and identify where their strengths and where their opportunities lie, to be able to develop the ability to create better connections with people. As an example, one of the deliverables that I gave at the tryouts, it was on self-awareness, and understanding our emotional intelligence is so critical into understanding how other people respond to us and how we can deliver information by understanding how other people are responding to us. So I think you hit the nail on the head. And then there was something else I was going to go on, but I'll remember it later here as we go. But I think those deliverables, like you were saying, that are tangible items that we are now able to identify and train to when we go to the world stage next year, and be able to identify what it is that, or how it is that we are so successful with our guests and with those that we're training. And I just remembered what I was going to share. You brought up exams, and something that we have in the US that is incredibly challenging is that when you look at how big the United States is, and that we operate 8 divisions basically independently, with an overarching body being PSIA-AASI national, and how much of a challenge that is, because geographically each region has their own snow conditions, mountains, right? Where some people are coming from vertical feet of 250 feet at their hills to what we see every day at Vail at 3,000 feet. And what that group has, or what we have to train to and train with, is so critical on how we manage groups, and how it sets up our clinics, so that way we can continue to learn. So Chris, I think those things that you're speaking to, that's what's getting me excited about what we can bring to the stage next year, because bringing 33,000 people together across 3,000 miles wide and whatever we are tall, that in itself is a feat that that should not go unnoticed. Because when I was part of the task force that created the first round of national standards back in 2008, 9, 10, whenever that was, how challenging it was to bring in 28 people into one room and get everyone on board. So I'm just imagining what you went through in doing the same thing with people skills. And then when we start talking about teaching skills, I mean, that in itself is such a challenge. And I'm so proud of where we ended up.
There we go. I had to unmute myself. You know, Mike, I love that you brought up the diversity in the country, and one of the challenges that we have trying to create consistency with our organization. And it was, I'm going to say, about 5 years ago that we entered into a strategic alliance initiative under the kind of the help of Dr. Pete Allison at Penn State. And I would love to hear both of your take about how the learning connection model, with the help of some of the academic structure and model from Dr. Pete Allison, brought us to the point of not only creating our fundamentals, but then this beautiful structure that actually allowed us to find this alliance through this initiative. Because previous to that, whenever we would get all the different divisions in the room together, everybody would start talking about processes. And then that was kind of the first unspoken rule, don't touch my process, right? And so what's interesting is how we actually ended up going a very different route. And I would love to hear you guys just kind of lay that out for everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's funny, Jen. You talk about the don't talk about process was the unspoken rule and sometimes spoken rule of those task force meetings. And going back to the Mike referenced the 2008 2009 I think we called them examiner conferences back then, and it was very much like, well, we do this, well, we do that. Okay, well, can we agree on this being a standard, and we're not going to talk about the rest of it. And through this alignment process to where we are now, through the strategic alignment process you referenced, and through the work with Penn State, to where the educational alignment has resulted in process becoming more aligned, and almost like a little bit of an end run around the don't talk about process, because we've ended up with non-negotiables in terms of what needs to be covered through the strategic alignment, and then that's led to changes in process. So to back up on that, the strategic alignment and the project with Penn State is one of the coolest things I've seen in the 20 years I've been a member of PSIA-AASI, and thinking to the number of times I've heard or myself thought, like, man, it sure would be cool to if my snowboard level 2 counted towards a resort management degree at a school. Well, some schools have been able to offer credits for PSIA classes, and usually that means that school has gone through the work to evaluate our education process and material, and figure out where that fits into their curriculum, and to be able to say, okay, that's worth this is worth that, and kind of each school has to go through that individually. And the process with Dr. Pete Allison and Penn State has basically gone through our entire national education material and done that work to put our learning, our materials into the language of academia. So learning outcomes, learning experiences, assessment criteria, assessment activities, all of that wording that came out and that everyone's kind of learning now is words that are very familiar to those in college now, and that's very intentional. That's aligning our education material with the world of academia, so that more schools can more easily say, oh, a PSIA level 2 is worth 12 credits or whatever that is, and that we can fit our education into a resort management type of degree or undergraduate degree that are offered at schools across the country. So adding value to your membership by saying, not only do we all know that a level 3 is in a way a degree in teaching skiing and snowboarding, but here's why. Here's the pieces that it's equivalent to. So that's really a really cool piece of all of that work. And as a side effect, we've dived into what makes great teaching. And Jen was on the teaching task force. We worked on that together. And it wasn't just a bunch of ski and snowboard instructors sitting in a room saying, oh, I think this is great teaching. We went through hundreds of pages of research and documentation from other worlds and other education programs. And, what do schools say great teaching is? What does education theory say great teaching is? And a lot of those teaching fundamentals, while they include language about skiing and snowboarding in ours, are rather universal to teaching anything. And we've tested our learning outcomes and tested our assessment process by taking completely unrelated things like unicycling or swim lessons or bicycle lessons, and saying, well, can you evaluate the teaching content, separate it from the technical content? Can you evaluate teaching content using our grid, regardless of what's being taught? And the answer is yes. And that's proved, shown validity to that process we went through, which I think is really cool.
Thank you. Thank you for that overview. So a handful of years, we had fundamentals. right? And I know that we were more aware of the fundamentals as they related to each of our technical disciplines. We had our alpine fundamentals, we had our snowboard fundamentals, and after a while, we then created fundamentals in the other disciplines as well. A lot of times people will ask me, and I would love to hear both of your take on this, what happened to the fundamentals? In other words, we have now learning outcomes, we have assessment criteria, and at one point, I know on the teaching task force, were considering using the teaching fundamentals as the learning outcomes, which became really, really tedious. But I'd be curious as to your perspective of, where do the fundamentals fit into all of this structure? And where do you place the value on, like, I don't know, training and development? Do you have people look at the learning outcomes or the assessment criteria or the fundamentals? I mean, tell me what your working approach is to these.
So jumping into that one, I think the fundamentals and I tend to live by how fundamentals are defined, that this is the basic level. This is the basic information that we need. However, it's not the goal, or shouldn't be the goal necessarily, or of the top level of what we're trying to achieve. So when I look at the fundamentals, it's about, this is what we should know and this is what we should be working on and toward. But these are the basics of how we either produce a turn, or whether or not, when you look at fundamentals of people skills, teaching skills, those are the basics that make up a good lesson. As we start getting into the assessment process, there's so much more than just the fundamentals that add to how we deliver information, whether it's from a visual perspective, being demonstrations, whether it's setting up a task so that way that way the candidates can be successful, or during training, that way our folks that are training can be successful with the task. So anyways, in a nutshell, that's where my thinking is. When I bring the fundamentals in, that's where and what we should understand of the direction that we're going. However, the learning outcomes are bigger than that. It's a bigger picture. There's more to it, and I believe it's endless. And I also believe that that as a clinician and as a trainer in the school, as long as I continue to want to be better and continue to push my goals when we talk about learning outcomes, that way I continue to learn, and therefore I can produce a better clinic, or I can deliver better information on the Hill. So being a lifelong learner, I think, is one of the mantras that I live by, to try to be a better clinician for all of those around me, and a better teammate for Chris and the rest of the team.
Great answer, Mike. I answer that question, and I actually love this question, Jen, because they're both super important pieces of information, and they carry different values of that information. So, like Mike said, the fundamentals are the truths. They are facts about teaching, about people skills, or about technical skills, and sometimes this is easier to explain through technical skills because we're a little bit more familiar with the 5 alpine fundamentals, or the 6 snowboard fundamentals. So if you think about the fundamental of controlling pivot or rotary, right? We both snowboard and alpine have a fundamental about how we control pivot or rotary. The fundamental is that we control it. That we need to control the amount of rotary or the amount of pivot we have in our equipment in order to create different things. Sometimes if you're doing a straight run, that's controlling that by not using rotary or pivot. Same thing with edging, or same thing with foot to foot, or pressure on the length of a snowboard. Sometimes you're riding centered, sometimes you're getting out of that to create a different outcome. And the fundamental doesn't describe that. The fundamental describes the relationship between body movements and a ski or board performance in terms of that it's a truth. It's always happening. When we move to learning outcomes, or we move towards some kind of application of that, you add the word how. So how does the skier control their pivot or their rotary? How does the skier or rider control pressure along the length of the ski or along the length of the snowboard? And that question changes it from a truth about it to something specific to the outcome. So if you watch, I mean, if you watch a new skier or snowboarder skiing versus a level 3 skiing or snowboarding, you expect there to be a difference in how they're controlling it. And that word "how" gives you the framework to discuss or to explain what's different in that. So the same thing happens when we move in towards the teaching fundamentals or the people skills fundamentals. The truth is that relationship. The truth is that we should be creating two-way communication in people skills, or that we should be establishing relationships based on trust. The truth is that we should be creating experiences, learning environments that allow for play and experimentation. Right? There are truths in those fundamentals. But as we move into learning outcomes, we're starting to explain what that difference is between a level 1, a level 2, or a level 3 that shows how those things are being applied. So we expect a level 1 candidate to show X amount of two-way communication versus a level 3 candidate. We expect to see a higher degree of ownership or mastery in that communication. Or we expect in a level 1 that they manage some risk for their students, right? They know safe places to travel versus to teach. They can be kind of reactive in safety, or at least kind of have what they were trained to be safe in. Whereas we expect a level 3 to be a little bit more proactive with that and know, maybe be giving tips before you get to a steeper piece of terrain, or working in a piece of smart style or the responsibility code in an experimentation or an on snow segment, rather than just reading it off the trail map or off the napkin or off the sign. And so we expect to see a difference in performance between that level 1 and the level 3. And that's what that learning outcome starts to explain, is that difference from here's the truth of everyone does this, to here are some specific things that we expect to see from a level 1, a level 2, or level 3 candidate.
And Chris, I would segue right off from that, saying, just to add to this, is that the same way that I ski short turns on one pitch versus the way I ski short turns in a bump run, there are two different skill blends in those two different runs. And I'm guessing the same thing that you would do on a snowboard. Now, when you look at the people skills, between yourself and Jen, very similar, where I would communicate, and I do communicate differently with you and Jen. And there's a different blend of how we communicate. Some people like things that are more written out, more structured. Others like things maybe more simple, or maybe use analogies to deliver that level of communication. So just like we do on the hill, there are plenty of things or plenty of ideas there with that application process of how we communicate or how we create relationships. No two people are the same, and we need to adjust, or we need to blend skills differently with different people, and that's delivering information on the teaching side as well.
Wow, great answers, you guys. I really like the way you stated that, Chris, in terms of universal versus level specific. When I'm introducing just the whole concept of where we are with the learning outcomes, I like to kind of give the visual of almost like a season-long academic course, right? And at the end of that season, whether it's a 100 level, 200 level, 300 level, there are specific outcomes that the learner is responsible for achieving, and the criteria lets us know with consistency how well somebody has achieved those outcomes. And I that was one of my questions was, what are some examples of how those outcomes grow in sophistication from level 1 to level 3, which you guys covered beautifully. I'm curious, when you visit another resort, another division, and if you are asked about the new certification standards and what has changed, what's the same and what has changed, how do you help people start to grasp where the greatest changes are, where the least amount of changes are, and some suggestions that will help them prepare?
Yeah, Jen, great question. So right offhand, I'm thinking about Central Division, just because they were the first division that I worked with right after team training. And once again, so for myself, being somewhat newer and trying to get caught up on the new assessment format, what were the deliverables? And first of all, I think the process was a big part of that. And what I mean by that is that we had quite a few meetings prior to the on snow portion of the clinic. So meeting with the trainers the divisional trainers. So that way we were all on board and giving the same information or moving in the same direction, because that alignment is key. So with my experiences so far, a lot of what we were chatting about was going through the assessment forms and addressing what good teaching looked like versus trying to go through each element of the assessment form. So looking at bigger picture, and then from there trying to define more of the particulars, if you will, or more of the details. And then if the teaching was good, what made it good? If the teaching was bad, what made it bad? So that was one of the, I think one of the primary, if you will, avenues or pathways that I looked at and others looked at in trying to deliver clinics or delivering clinics for Central Division. So the other thing I think that's a big one this year is the self-assessment and being able to understand our own skiing and riding to a higher level, what we are working on, where our strengths are, where our opportunities lie. So that way we understand in the bigger picture of basically what we are doing with our own body performance, and then board performance, and then how that can translate to the guest.
I love that. What have been some of your experiences, Chris, with some of the snowboard community in various divisions across the country? How are the new standards being received? Are there concerns? Are there areas that are taking more clarification? Oh, looks like Chris is having connectivity issues.
I think I'm back.
Oh, there he is. He's back.
Yeah, it's been really interesting getting to lead some clinics. I've been in Central Division, in Northern Rocky, and in Intermountain this year, getting to lead clinics, and everyone seems in the clinics I've been in pretty optimistic about the overall value of what this is adding to PSIA-AASI. A lot of the challenges that's seen. I mean, the first thing that started to come up was about people skills. Everyone was really nervous, I would say, about the introduction of the people skills, and like, oh, now we're going to be evaluating who people are, and that answer to that one is that it's not about personalities, it's about behaviors, and we've all had people in clinics or in exams before who maybe take it a little bit too far and are kind of detracting from other people's experiences, and those are behaviors which we now have through this framework given permission to give coaching to, and we can all think of that person in our locker room or that we've worked with before who was a great instructor, who had great clientele, but maybe it was just a little bit of that when it comes to some skills elements, or maybe the card element that on the locker room has basic skills job.
Oh gosh darn it, Chris, we're just not hearing you, and this just sounds so wonderful and valuable. And I wanted to actually go a little further into the people skills. I know that for so long, it just seems like people skills are one of those things we've considered to be innate. Someone is either a people person or they're not. We always used to say, hire really good people because we can teach them how to ski and ride. It's what we do. But now we have actually identifiable skill sets. We have criteria that help us to be more aware and develop these. I'd be curious to hear, what are you finding are some effective ways for instructors, whether they're in line with one of the levels of certification or not, to be training and developing more awareness in their people skills?
Yeah, Jen, I think if we could take a step back, just something Chris said that struck a couple of thoughts about the clinics that I've led for Central. When we were talking about people skills and the professional element, a couple of things came to mind. One, the professionalism was something that came up in a few of my clinics, and how that was being evaluated over the course of their process, and whether or not that could be effective. And it was also an opportunity for us to create a professional environment in which we are professionals, and it's something now that we can score too. And that triggered some anxiety for some of the folks that were in my groups. The people skills side, it's the way the assessment sheets are set up is that when I go through and think about people skills, and there are certain points where it felt like going through this process, even with trainers, that some of the trainers were just throwing something out there, such as, "Hey, Jen, how are you doing today? What is your goal?" And it sounded so manufactured when that question came up. It really reminds me of what stage of Fitz and Posner that group was in, or that individual was in, whether it was cognitive or associative, where it wasn't that natural or that autonomous stage where this is how people set up and start delivering those authentic relationships, or those authentic type of introductions or deliverables when they are talking about skiing or snowboarding. So those that really owned it, it was easy to check off the boxes. Those that did not own it, and they were either, like I was saying, cognitive of their efforts, it just seemed a little awkward and a little rigid. So I lost track of the exact question that you were asking. I believe it was something around how do we coach people skills in that light. Can you reiterate the question, please?
Well, yeah, as a trainer for many years, I know, as along with my fellow trainers, it's always been taking people out and working on their skiing always seems to be the most popular. And it's taken a little bit of time to get the culture to shift, to even open up to training now, and keeping in consideration teaching fundamentals and teaching and learning skill sets and models, etc. But people skills seems like it's, I think we're still overcoming this culture of, or this previous idea that it's just something that is innate. How are you setting up and structuring training to introduce people to, or to help them develop their skill sets in the area of people skills?
So I led this clinic up in Michigan on their mini academy, and there was a very good friend of mine who's the director of Highland up in Minnesota. And I do not necessarily recommend this methodology, if you will, for delivering this. And it actually turned out quite well, but it was a little bumpy along the way. So the setup was that we'll just call him Luke because that's his name. So I grabbed Luke and asked him if he'd be a participant in this. I had 10 people in the clinic, and I asked Luke if he would be okay if I just kind of ignored him for the first 20 or 30 minutes of the event. As we went through the process, where I did not ask Luke his name. I did not ask for his goals, his needs, anything else that may be important to the setup of the clinic. However, I went around and asked the other 9, and I delivered eye contact. Basically all the boxes were checked on delivering or trying to communicate with people with body language and verbal skills. Through that process, through that first half an hour, 45 minutes, it was very fascinating to watch how 9 other people, that they started separating themselves from me because they saw how I was treating one person in the group. And what I'm getting at with that is that it was this experiment that we did. We at one point, then we called timeout. We went around the horn and started asking each individual, what was going on and why we were disconnecting from the group. And it was fascinating with the answers that people came up with. At the very mild feedback, someone said, I thought you guys were friends and you were just messing with him, which was great. The other end of the spectrum, there were a few 4-letter words that were mentioned or something like that, but people thought that I was so standoffish with Luke that they did not want to come in and be a part, or they did not feel engaged or willing to engage because of how I was treating someone else in the group. Now, again, that was a unique scenario, and you've got to be confident with your people skills to be able to deliver on that end. And it's very challenging because it took a while to regain the trust of the group and to build that trust with that group of folks that I didn't know. So we had great discussions afterwards. There are many other ways to approach it. And I also think that by seeking out individual feedback and then having that conversation of why you were seeking out that individual feedback, because we want that level of engagement from everyone, and then having those discussion points of what's going right in the group, and then how do you create vulnerability. And some ideas of creating vulnerability in that group is whether or not we're asking someone how the clinic is going and whether we are on track with their goals and their needs. So there are many ways to do this, but when we ask the questions, then with a follow-up conversation about, hey, this is a people skill, this is something we are working on. What did you take away from my question about how the clinic is going? As an example, Jen, are we skiing enough, Jen? Maybe we ask something as simple as that before lunchtime. And Jen, if you turn around and say no to me, then okay, what do we need to adjust to make sure that we're skiing enough vertical feet so that way we are connecting at that level? And so, but again, having that open dialogue in a real-time clinic scenario is a great way to deliver on the people skills, because it's authentic and it's real time. There's nothing better, I think, than real time and experiential learning.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Mike. I think that, the people skills they're there and they're present regardless of any interaction that we're in a training setting, in a teaching setting, et cetera, and creating awareness first and foremost, and then just diving into different ways that we can continue to develop our awareness. I mean, it's interesting, even as you brought up the point about if we're skiing enough, that's a really hard thing to ask, either as an instructor or even as a trainer or a clinic leader, because the responses that you get can be very challenging, even to your own presence and your own awareness. And so it really makes you take a step back and take a breath and figure out, how's the best way and most constructive way to respond to that, the way that honors everybody's ideas and thoughts and needs the most. Yeah. Oh, I had another question and it is leaving me. Drawing a blank, totally drawing a blank. So you've been stepping in this year at Vail Resorts, thankfully, and helping out a lot with various levels of certification. How are you helping everybody find the tools that they need? So in other words, I'm starting to, I'm thinking like even beyond the certification standards, how much are you having people bring out, say, the performance guides, or like we developed in Rocky Mountain this year, a new training and development guide? Have you been presenting those to people, and how are you helping them use those tools?
So first of all, I would say I over the last few weeks, what I'm finding out about being here, so thanks for having me here, is that it's very easy to develop a clientele here as well, especially this year. So I don't feel like I've been training as much as I could be. So or as much as I would like to be sometimes, I guess. Let me put it in those words. I only have so much time, and then trying to develop and trying to put out the information, that has been challenging, because I feel like coming off of being a manager at a resort, then coming back into being an instructor, I feel like that has been challenging for me to get caught up on all of the educational materials that we have. all the resources that we have. So I'm relying a lot on my peers, being Chris Caruso, Chris Rogers, you, Jen. And that's where, honestly, that's where I feel like I am not up to speed yet, or not up to par with what we need to be successful. So just being honest, and so yeah, it's been challenging, and I always look forward to those challenges. So
Wonderful. One of the things that I want to bring up to make everybody aware of is that, in addition to our certification standards, we have a couple of tools that are available online at the Rocky Mountain site. One of those is the performance guide, which then presents ideas about what would be contributors to either a more success towards the criteria as they align with the or with the learning outcomes, as well as contributors that would align somebody with being less successful. And so it gives them behaviors that are observable and very specific to each of the different areas that maybe they can start observing in their own teaching. And then there was a small subcommittee that went on to develop something called a training and development guide. And this is something that is specific to Rocky Mountain. We have in the past had what's known as a proficiency log. And the thought behind that a number of years ago is that it was a kind of a tool that an instructor could use that would help them really understand the depth and the breadth of what it was going to take for them to attempt a level of certification of assessment. And they would fill it out with the acknowledgement of, or with some input of a trainer. And when we looked at those this summer, they needed to be aligned with the new standards and with the new learning connection model. So they were revamped to align with teaching skills, people skills, and technical skills. But it's more, I guess the best way to explain it is if we were to give some examples of how somebody could create a learning experience, in their own training and development around some of the assessment criteria and learning outcomes. And those are available for level 1, for level 2, for level 3, and they're aligned with the teaching skills, the technical skills, both with suggestions for both skiing, technical understanding, and movement analysis, as well as the teaching skills. Did I cover all those? Anyway, each of the 3 skill sets. And I think that a lot of people are just now discovering those, but I want to put that emphasis out there that, not just for somebody who is looking to achieve a level of certification, but anybody in the instruction field, anybody in this profession. These are some ideas that you could ask yourself after a handful of lessons, to do a little bit of a reflective observation of what you're doing yourself out on the snow. So I just wanted to make everybody aware of these various tools that can help anybody grow at any level. Love this question that has popped up. Has everybody seen Wednesdays with the Wild Man? And he is definitely one of the people skills spokesperson.
Hey, Francis, that was the talk of the town during Logan Academy. Wild Man. Oh,
Wild
yes.
Man.
Robin Barnes was all over that one, asking everyone if they've seen the reel. So well done.
I love that, and I'm sure there are many to come still. I can't wait as he approaches each of the different areas of the people skills, and then why not plow right into the teaching skills and technical skills? We could be watching him all the way through his kindergarten.
Do you think we can find a uniform for him?
Oh my God! Well, we're going to have to, aren't we? I think so. Well, Mike, gosh, I'm sorry that we lost Chris, and it's been great hearing your perspective and what you're sharing and developing in professionals across the great nation of ours and in PSIA everywhere. And I don't have any more specific questions. I think that you really covered a lot of really interesting information.
And Jen, thanks again for setting this up and having us here. And obviously, I don't want to speak for Chris. And I also believe that Chris and I are well aligned, along with Lindsay, that we are looking to bring the school to the next level. And I think these talks are part of that. And I love the connectivity that we have across the U.S. now versus just having it within our region. I think it adds a lot to a lot to the bigger picture. So again, thanks for hosting us. And I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, because it's your personal time. And I hope you found something valuable during this hour.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your time tonight, Mike. Good night.